Anna sat in the back of the wagon, her wrists resting heavy on her lap. The sky was a sickly gray, swallowing the horizon in silence. Dust slipped under the canvas roof and settled on her hair, her lips, her eyes. She didn't blink it away. The driver never spoke. She tried once to ask where they were going, but his eyes stayed on the road, the lines in his face deeper than any answer he could give. The horses moved at a steady, exhausted pace. Every hoofbeat felt like a countdown she couldn't stop. They arrived as the sun dipped low, burning orange behind the hills. The ranch appeared suddenly, like a wound cut open in the dry land. A large wooden house, walls bleached by the sun, stood apart from two small sheds. A lone windmill creaked in the wind, turning without purpose. The driver jumped down first. He opened the wagon door but didn't offer his hand. Anna hesitated, sliding her thin legs over the edge. Her dress caught on a nail, tearing near the hem. She tugged it free without a sound. Her feet touched the ground like she expected it to swallow her whole. A man stepped out from the porch, tall, broad shoulders, a wide hat shading most of his face. His posture alone told her everything. No softness lived here. He moved slowly, hands by his sides, each step deliberate. Even the air seemed to tense around him. "Anna," he said. His voice was flat, almost bored. He didn't call her miss or girl, just her name, as if she was already a belonging. She tried to answer, but her throat squeezed shut. He waited one heartbeat, then turned and walked inside. No command, no welcome, just expectation. The driver pushed her forward with a hard palm between her shoulder blades. She stumbled, caught herself, and shuffled toward the porch. Inside, the hallway smelled of dust and boiled meat. A single oil lamp threw yellow shapes across the walls. The floor creaked with every step she took. In the corner, a pair of boots lay perfectly aligned, as if no one had dared touch them in years. Elijah, the man, stood by a table. He poured water into a tin cup and placed it in front of her. She didn't move. He waited, head tilted slightly, eyes invisible under the hat's brim. Finally, she stepped forward and took the cup with both hands. Her fingers trembled so badly that water splashed over the edge onto the floorboards. Elijah watched the spill, but his face stayed blank. She drank in small gulps, each swallow echoing inside her chest. The room felt smaller with every breath. He moved closer. She pressed her spine against the wall, eyes wide. "Rooms are upstairs," he said, turning away. "You do what you're told. You don't leave." That was it. No explanation, no questions. He walked into the shadows of a side room and disappeared. Anna stood frozen, the tin cup still clutched to her chest. Her mind screamed for her to run back out the door, but her legs refused. The wind outside howled through the cracks in the walls, carrying dust and the ghost of distant coyotes. She took one cautious step toward the staircase, then another. Her hand slid along the rail, splinters biting into her skin. Upstairs, she saw a single door cracked open. A thin line of light leaked out, trembling like a nervous breath. She pushed the door open. Inside, a narrow bed, a chipped basin, a window nailed shut from the outside. A small wooden cross hung crooked above the bed, its edges worn from touch. Anna dropped the tin cup on the floor and sat on the bed. The mattress creaked under her weight, dust puffing up around her. She curled forward, pressing her forehead to her knees, as if she could fold herself out of existence. Somewhere downstairs, a chair scraped against the floor. Then silence. A silence so deep it felt alive, pressing on her skull, whispering to her that she had already vanished from the world beyond these dry hills. Her eyes stayed open all night. Anna did not sleep. Her body stayed curled tight on the narrow bed, her arms wrapped around her legs like a shield. Every creak in the house below felt like it echoed straight into her chest. She watched the nailed-shut window, as if it might suddenly swing open and swallow her. The sun crawled over the hills, pouring pale light through the cracks in the boards. Her eyelids stung, but she kept them open. At dawn, footsteps climbed the stairs. Each step was slow, heavy, deliberate, a heartbeat pounding up from the floor. The door swung open without a knock. Elijah stood there, a silhouette framed in the soft gray light. His hat cast a shadow over his face, leaving only the pale line of his lips visible. He looked at her for a long moment, saying nothing. Then he motioned with 2 fingers. "Downstairs," he said. His voice was dry as old wood. Anna stood slowly. Her bare feet touched the cold floor and she shivered. The dress she wore hung wrinkled and dirty from travel, the torn hem brushing her ankles like a ghost's breath. She moved past him, careful not to brush his coat, and followed the narrow hallway down. The kitchen smelled of stale bread and smoke. A pot bubbled softly on the stove. Martha, the housemaid she had glimpsed the night before, moved around the room like a moth, her eyes down, her hands shaking with every motion. Anna looked at her, searching for something human, some silent connection, but Martha's eyes stayed fixed on the floor. Elijah sat at the head of a rough wooden table. He rested his elbows wide, hands folded under his chin. He watched Anna as she entered, his gaze as sharp as a hawk's. She stood frozen at the threshold, her fingers twisting together. "You work here now," he said. "You clean. You help Martha. You eat when I say. You sleep when I say." Anna swallowed hard. Her mouth felt like sand. "You don't leave this house. You don't talk unless spoken to. You don't touch anything I don't give you permission to touch." His words fell like stones into a well, each one echoing and sinking deep. Anna felt them pile on her shoulders, crushing the last of the warmth from her body. He leaned back, his chair creaking. "Understand?" She nodded once. Her head felt too heavy. "Say it." Anna's lips trembled. I understand." Silence stretched across the room like a taut rope. Elijah's eyes narrowed, as if measuring the space between her words and her heart. Then he jerked his chin toward the table. Martha placed a chipped bowl of porridge in front of Anna, her hands quick and quiet. Anna sat slowly. She took the spoon, her fingers numb. Every movement felt like it was being watched, every blink, every breath catalogued and judged. The porridge was tasteless and cold. Anna forced each bite down, staring at the knots in the wood beneath her bowl. Elijah didn't eat. He only watched. When she finished, he stood abruptly. "Clean the barn today," he said. "Martha will show you." He turned and left the room, boots echoing down the hall. The door slammed shut behind him. Martha didn't look up. She simply gathered the empty bowls and set them by the sink. Her hands moved with the tired rhythm of someone who had done this for too many years. Anna tried to speak, but her voice died before it reached her lips. Martha glanced at her, a flicker of something, pity, warning, in her eyes, before she turned away again. Outside, the sun rose higher, heating the dry ground until it shimmered. Anna followed Martha across the yard to a low wooden barn. Each step felt like she was sinking deeper into something she couldn't name, something that smelled of dust and old blood. Inside the barn, the air was thick with hay and the sour stench of animals. A pitchfork leaned against the far wall, next to a broken saddle and a stack of rough ropes. Martha pointed wordlessly to a pile of dirty straw. Anna nodded and knelt, her fingers sinking into the brittle mess. Hours passed in a haze of sweat and stinging arms. Dust clung to her throat, and sweat traced slow lines down her back. Once, she looked up and saw Martha staring at her from the doorway. The woman's face was pale, lips pressed tight, hands twisting the edge of her apron. Then she turned and disappeared. When the sun began to bleed orange across the sky, Anna heard the distant creak of the porch steps. Elijah stood there watching, his silhouette sharp against the burning light. She could not see his face, but she felt his stare like a brand on her skin. She looked down again, her hands full of straw, and swallowed the taste of fear. That night, Anna lay on the narrow bed, her bones aching, The image of Elijah standing in the sunset burned behind her eyelids. She understood now. She belonged here. The rules were simple, brutal, and final, and there was no door left to run through. The morning began before the sun. A thin gray light pressed against the nailed-shut window, but Anna was already awake. Her body ached in strange places, small cuts on her palms from rough straw still throbbing. She lay listening to the house breathe, floorboards settling, the distant drip of water, a faint rustling she could never quite place. Downstairs, Martha was already moving. Anna heard the clink of tin cups, the scrape of wood. The smell of burnt bread drifted up, mixing with the heavy scent of dust. She rose slowly, each movement careful and silent, as if the air might shatter under her weight. At the table, Elijah sat in his usual place. Martha moved around him like a ghost, placing a chipped mug in front of him, her head always low. When Anna entered, Martha barely glanced up. "Sit," Elijah ordered. Anna obeyed. Her fingers fumbled at the edge of the table, finding old scratches and dark stains. Martha set a small piece of bread and a cup of weak coffee in front of her. Anna ate without tasting, eyes on her plate. Halfway through the meal, the door creaked open. A man stepped inside, older than Anna, but younger than Elijah. His hair was a pale brown, skin sunburned and lined from hard work. He carried a small sack over one shoulder and paused when he saw her. Their eyes met for a single moment. Anna saw something flicker in him. Surprise? Maybe pity? But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Samuel," Elijah said without turning. The man gave a slow nod and stepped past Anna, dropping the sack on the floor with a dull thud. He started unpacking. A few cans, some dry beans, rough cloth. Each movement was careful, almost ceremonial. Anna watched his hands. They were big, scarred, but moved gently, like he feared breaking something fragile. "You'll help Samuel in the shed today," Elijah said to Anna. Her heart stuttered. Work was safer than the house, she thought, but the shed felt like another trap. She nodded, unable to form words. After breakfast, Samuel led her outside. The sun was harsh already, turning the dust into a shimmering veil. The yard felt even emptier in daylight, the barn and shed standing like silent watchers. Inside the shed, it smelled of old rope, oil, and metal. Tools hung neatly on the walls. Everything had a place, each object worn from years of use. Samuel handed her a rag and pointed to a rusted scythe. "Clean," he said simply. They worked side by side for hours. Samuel said little, but he never raised his voice. Sometimes Anna felt his eyes on her, a quick glance, almost protective. When she met his gaze, he looked away, focusing on the blade in his hands. Once he paused and wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist. "You came yesterday?" he asked softly. Anna froze. The words felt dangerous. She looked at the door, half expecting Elijah to appear. Samuel waited, patient. She nodded once. He opened his mouth as if to ask more, but closed it again, returning to his work. The silence between them grew thick, heavy as the afternoon heat. Around midday, Martha appeared at the shed door with a tin plate. She handed it to Anna without a word, a small piece of dried meat and half a potato. Martha's eyes darted toward Samuel, then back to Anna, her fingers trembling as she handed over the food. Anna looked at Martha's thin face, searching for softness. She saw only exhaustion and a flicker of something deeper, hidden under layers of obedience. Before Anna could say anything, Martha turned and hurried back toward the house, her apron flapping like a bird's wing. In the final hour of light, Samuel cleaned his tools carefully, every stroke slow and deliberate. Anna wiped her hands on her skirt, watching him. "Be careful," he said finally, his voice so low she almost missed it. She wanted to ask what he meant. She wanted to ask so many things. But Samuel turned away, hanging the last tool on the wall, and the moment slipped through her fingers like water. They walked back to the house in silence. Elijah stood on the porch, arms crossed. His eyes followed them, cold and sharp. Anna felt the familiar knot tighten in her chest. She dropped her gaze and stepped inside, the walls closing around her once more. That night, she lay in bed, replaying Samuel's brief words. In that simple, "Be careful," she heard a hidden world of warnings and secrets. She turned toward the nailed window, imagining the open land beyond it. But the house stayed silent. The cross above her bed leaned slightly to the left, watching, and Anna knew she was not the first to hear those words. The next morning came slow, dragging gray light across the nailed window like an old rag. Anna sat on the edge of her bed, feet flat on the cold floor. Her hands twisted in her lap. Sleep had visited her only in short, broken waves. Each time her eyes closed, she saw Elijah's silhouette, Samuel's guarded glances, and Martha's empty stare. She moved down the narrow stairs carefully, feeling each creak echo in her bones. In the kitchen, Martha prepared the morning meal. The same stale bread, the same weak coffee. Anna took her place at the table without a word. Elijah sat across from her, silent, his eyes hidden under the brim of his hat. The way he held his fork was precise, as if every movement was rehearsed 1,000 times. After breakfast, Elijah left the house without a word. His boots thudded across the yard, then faded into the distance. Martha gathered the plates, her hands trembling slightly. Anna watched her, trying to catch her eyes, but Martha kept her head low, her hair hanging like a curtain. Anna stood and followed Martha into the small washroom. The sink was chipped, water cold as winter bone. Martha scrubbed each dish with quick, jerking motions. Anna took a rag and began drying. Their hands brushed once, and Martha flinched so sharply the bowl nearly shattered. Outside, Anna saw Samuel cross the yard, carrying a heavy sack of feed. His shoulders were hunched, head low. A thin line of sweat darkened the back of his shirt, even in the early sun. He paused near the barn door, set the sack down, and wiped his forehead with a slow, resigned motion. From the window, Anna saw Elijah return. He moved like a shadow sliding across the yard. Samuel stiffened at once, then bent quickly to lift the sack again. Elijah stood watching, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. Even from a distance, Anna felt the heat of his gaze crawl up her neck. Later, Martha gave Anna a broom and pointed toward the main hallway. Anna started sweeping, her motions slow and deliberate. Every step felt like moving through water. The hallway was lined with old photographs, frames thick with dust. She stopped in front of one. The photo was faded, the edges curled. A young girl stood beside Elijah, her hair in two tight braids, her dress clean and new. Elijah's hand rested heavy on her shoulder. The girl's eyes looked straight into the lens, wide, hollow, already resigned. Anna felt her breath catch. She moved to another frame. A different woman this time, older, her smile tight and thin. Elijah stood behind her, his face as empty and flat as in the other photo. Each picture was a small tombstone, a quiet record of other lives consumed by this place. A floorboard creaked behind her. Anna jumped, nearly dropping the broom. Martha stood there, holding a stack of linens. Her mouth opened as if to speak, but no sound came. Instead, Martha looked at the photo, then at Anna. Her eyes were wide, a small tremor in her chin. Without warning, Martha turned and hurried down the hallway. Anna stared after her, her heart beating too fast. She forced her breathing steady, then glanced again at the photos. The air felt thicker now, the walls closer. Outside, a crow landed on the porch railing, its black eyes shining. It called once, a harsh, echoing sound, before flapping away into the hot sky. Anna felt its cry shiver down her spine. That evening, after chores, Anna sat on her bed, staring at the nailed window. The sunset leaked through in thin, bloody lines. She listened to the house, Elijah's boots moving below, Martha's soft shuffling, Samuel's distant steps outside. She traced each sound, imagining their paths like ghosts moving through the dark. She imagined the girl with the braids standing right where she stood now, looking at the same crooked cross. The house was full of silent witnesses, dust, photos, worn floorboards. They all watched her, pressing her deeper into her own skin. Anna lay down, pulling her knees to her chest. A single word circled in her mind over and over until she drifted into a restless, thin sleep. Why? Morning light crawled across the walls like a thin animal. Slow and cautious, Anna sat up on the bed, her hair tangled, her eyes raw from another restless night. She heard the usual sounds below. Martha moving carefully, the faint groan of the front door, Elijah's low voice, a sharp word that cut the air. Anna stood, pressing her palm against the nailed window. The wood felt cold and rough, splinters catching on her skin. Beyond it, the pale dawn shimmered, promising a world she could no longer touch. Downstairs, Martha waited in the kitchen, setting 2 bowls on the table. The weak smell of thin broth filled the room. Elijah sat with his arms crossed, staring at Anna as she entered. His stare was a silent order, sharp enough to flay skin. Anna sat slowly, her fingers curling around the edge of the table. She avoided his gaze, focusing instead on the knots in the wood, on her own shallow breath. Halfway through the meal, Martha dropped a spoon. It clattered to the floor, echoing too loud in the quiet room. Martha bent to pick it up, her hand trembling so violently that it struck the edge of the table. The spoon skittered across the floor. Anna moved instinctively. She reached down to grab it before Martha could. For one heartbeat, her fingers closed around the cold metal. But when she looked up, Elijah was standing. His eyes burned through her, black and bottomless. The room froze. Martha straightened slowly, her face ashen, lips pressed thin. Elijah stepped around the table, each boot heavy on the boards. He stopped in front of Anna. "Did I tell you to move?" His voice was so quiet, it felt more dangerous than any shout. Anna tried to speak, her mouth opening and closing. No words came. He took the spoon from her hand. For a moment, his fingers touched hers. A cold shock that made her flinch. He looked down at the spoon, then back at her. "On your knees," he said. Anna's breath caught. Her eyes jumped to Martha, but Martha looked away. Her whole body turned to the wall as if she could vanish. Slowly, Anna slid from her chair, dropping to the floor. Her knees touched the cold boards, pain shooting up her legs. She stared at the spoon in his hand. "Clean," he ordered. She lowered her head, took the spoon, and began scrubbing the small metal surface with her fingers, wiping away an invisible dirt that wasn't there. Her cheeks burned, a hot flush crawling down her neck. Elijah watched in silence. His boots shifted slightly, the only sound in the room. When he finally turned and walked away, she remained on her knees, her breath ragged and sharp. Martha still stood by the wall, her back rigid. Anna's hands shook as she placed the spoon on the table. She stood slowly, her legs weak beneath her. She felt something shift inside her. A crack, thin but deep, opening in her chest. Later, while she washed the dishes, Martha stood close beside her. The woman's eyes flickered toward Anna's red knees. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to speak, but she swallowed it down, turning to dry the plates with shaking hands. Outside, the sky turned a pale, endless blue. Samuel moved in the yard, head bent, working without pause. Anna watched him from the window, her fingers damp and cold in the water basin. She imagined stepping through the door, running to him, asking for help. But the thought dissolved as quickly as it came, leaving only a heavy emptiness. That night, Anna returned to her room slowly. She undressed in the dark, every movement small and careful, as if she were afraid to wake something watching in the shadows. She touched her knees gently, feeling the raw skin under her fingertips. Then she lay down. curling into herself like a frightened animal. Her mind replayed the moment over and over. The spoon, his voice, the floor beneath her knees. Each repetition carved the crack wider. For the first time since her arrival, Anna let silent tears slip down her face, soaking into the thin pillow. She didn't try to stop them. In the heavy dark, she whispered to herself, so soft no one else could hear. I am still here. I'm still here. But she wasn't sure if she believed it. The days blended into each other like dirty water running down a dry path. Each morning, Anna rose before the light fully crept through the window cracks. Her body had learned to obey the quiet rhythm of the house, each movement small, each breath careful. But inside, something restless began to grow. The crack in her chest, opened that day on the kitchen floor, pulsed with a new heat. Each night, she turned the words over and over. I am still here. Each time, they felt thinner, weaker. One night, the moon rose bright and full, casting silver shapes across the walls. Anna lay awake, eyes locked on the nailed window. Her breath moved slow and shallow. Her fingers curled tight against her chest. She sat up. Her heart hammered so loud she thought it might wake the whole house. Slowly, she stepped out of bed. The floor felt icy under her bare feet. Each board creaked like a gunshot, but she forced herself forward. She opened her door, peering into the narrow hallway. The house was silent, no footsteps, no murmurs, only the distant, soft sigh of the wind through the roof. Anna tiptoed past Martha's closed door. For a moment, she paused. She thought she heard a quiet sob inside, but she couldn't wait. She turned toward the staircase and began to descend. In the kitchen, the lamp was out. The moonlight cut through the gaps in the boards, leaving thin white stripes across the floor. She moved to the back door. Her fingers found the latch. Old, rough, trembling under her touch. She pulled. The door shuddered but held fast. Anna felt a cold wave wash over her. She pulled again, harder. The latch didn't give. Her breath quickened. Panic clawed at her throat. She bent low, hands searching the edge of the frame. Nails, old and bent, hammered deep into the wood. Elijah had sealed it? She hadn't noticed before. She pressed her forehead against the door, her chest heaving. A creak cut through the dark behind her. She turned. Elijah stood at the edge of the hallway. No hat this time, his face fully visible in the moonlight. Sharp lines, sunken eyes, lips set in a thin line. He didn't move. He simply watched. Anna's mouth fell open, but no sound came. Her whole body felt heavy, sinking into the floor. He stepped forward, slow and quiet, as if approaching a skittish animal. His hand reached out, resting lightly on the back of a chair. He tilted his head, studying her, eyes dark and endless. Going somewhere? He asked. His voice was almost gentle, and that made it worse. Anna shook her head weakly, but her hands still gripped the doorframe behind her, nails biting into the wood. Her legs trembled, ready to collapse. Elijah's fingers drummed on the chair. He looked past her to the sealed door, then back at her face. Upstairs, he said. Anna didn't move. She felt her ribs tighten, her breath shatter in her throat. He took one step closer. Now, he said, his voice lower. Anna's feet moved on their own. She turned, walking past him. She felt his breath as she passed, cold and damp. At the foot of the stairs, she glanced back. Elijah stood exactly where she left him, watching, motionless. She climbed slowly, each step a punishment. At the top, she entered her room and closed the door behind her. She didn't dare lock it. She fell to her knees beside the bed, her forehead pressed to the rough blanket. Below, she heard the floor creak as Elijah moved. Then silence. Anna stayed like that for what felt like hours. Her arms wrapped tight around her body, rocking slightly. Her mind screamed, but her mouth stayed shut. When she finally crawled into bed, her limbs felt like stones. The moonlight had shifted. now painting the cross above her bed in a crooked glow. Anna turned her face to the wall, her breath shaking. The crack inside her no longer felt like an opening to escape. It felt like a wound, raw and deep, swallowing the last pieces of her. She whispered the words again, but this time they didn't sound like hers. I am still here. The house and the dark beyond it answered with silence. The next morning tasted like ashes in Anna's mouth. Her body moved out of bed, but her mind felt left behind somewhere in the hallway, where Elijah had stood and watched her like a hawk studying a broken mouse. Downstairs, Martha prepared the same thin porridge, her fingers trembling so badly she nearly spilled the pot. Elijah sat at the table, his head slightly tilted down, staring at a dark spot on the wood. When Anna entered, he didn't look up. She took her place silently. Martha placed a bowl in front of her, then quickly stepped away, her shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. Anna's spoon scraped against the bowl, each metallic sound sharp and painful. Elijah finally lifted his eyes. They locked on Anna, cold and glassy. He didn't need words. The message was clear. She had tried to leave, and she had failed. The punishment wasn't a slap or a scream. It was his quiet presence, heavy as an iron chain. After breakfast, Elijah ordered her to the barn. His voice was calm, almost polite. That calm felt more terrifying than any anger. In the barn, the air was thick with dust and animal musk. Old ropes hung like limp snakes from nails in the walls. Anna picked up a broom, her hands trembling so badly she nearly dropped it. Hours crawled past. The broom moved slowly over the floor, pushing hay and dirt into small piles. Sweat crawled down her spine, itching under her dress. Then, behind a stack of rotting crates, something caught her eye. A small torn piece of cloth wedged between two boards. She set the broom down and knelt, her fingers digging into the gap. The fabric came free with a soft rip. It was part of a dress, pale blue, faded and stained. Anna pressed it to her chest, a sudden coldness washing through her. She looked closer and saw something else, scratches on the wood, almost hidden by the dust. She leaned forward, squinting. Words. Help me. 3 letters barely carved, ragged and weak. Her breath caught in her throat. Her heart thudded so hard she felt it echo in her ears. She traced the letters with her fingertip, feeling the desperation trapped in each cut. Anna glanced over her shoulder. The barn door was open a crack, sunlight slicing across the dirt floor. Outside, she saw Elijah talking to Samuel near the fence. Their figures were sharp against the pale sky, 2 dark statues in the dust. Anna clutched the scrap of fabric tighter. Her mind reeled. Someone else had been here. Someone else had tried to fight, to cry out, and they had failed. Suddenly Samuel turned and looked directly at the barn. For a moment, their eyes met. Anna froze, the fabric burning in her hand. Samuel's gaze shifted to her hand, then quickly back to Elijah. His mouth pressed into a tight line. He said something to Elijah, then bent to pick up a tool, moving away quickly. Anna felt the ground sway under her feet. She shoved the cloth into the pocket of her dress and stood, her legs shaking. She returned to sweeping, her motions robotic. Her mind repeated the carved words like a chant. Help me, help me, help me. When she finally stepped out of the barn at dusk, Elijah waited on the porch. His arms crossed, his shape a solid shadow against the last orange streaks of sky. She walked slowly toward the house, each step heavy as stone. She felt the fabric in her pocket, like a hidden flame against her skin. That night, she lay in bed, her hand pressed to her pocket under the blanket. The fabric felt alive, pulsing with the ghost of the girl who had left it behind. Anna stared at the cross on the wall, her breath shallow, her heart a hammer in a coffin. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaked. Then silence. She whispered to the dark, I saw you. But whether she meant the girl before her, or the man downstairs, or something even deeper inside herself, she didn't know. The morning sun rose hard and white, cutting through the cracks of Anna's room like sharp knives. She sat on the edge of her bed, clutching the scrap of blue fabric in her fist. Her fingers had gone numb from holding it through the night. Downstairs, the house was too quiet. No clinking dishes, no slow footsteps. Anna stepped carefully down the stairs, her breath thin and quick. In the kitchen, Martha stood against the wall, her hands wringing the edge of her apron until her knuckles turned white. Her face was pale, lips cracked. She didn't look up when Anna entered. Elijah sat at the table. A small wooden box lay open in front of him. Inside, a pair of rusty shears, thick rope, an old belt folded neatly. Anna froze at the threshold. Her legs refused to move. Elijah lifted his head slowly. His eyes crawled over her face, her hair, her hands. Finally, they stopped on her pocket. He didn't speak. Instead, he stood, moving with the slow certainty of a predator. He stepped forward, and Anna instinctively backed away. Her heel hit the doorframe. She glanced at Martha, searching for help, but Martha's head hung lower, as if she might collapse into the floor. Elijah reached out and grabbed Anna's wrist. His grip was iron, cold and final. He pulled her toward the table, her feet scraping across the wooden boards. She tried to speak, but her throat closed up. He threw her into the chair, her back slamming against the hard wood. Her pocket turned inside out. The piece of blue fabric fluttered to the floor between them. Elijah bent down, picked it up, and studied it. For a long moment, the room felt frozen. Then slowly, he looked at Anna. His lips curled into a smile so slight it looked like a wound reopening. He dropped the fabric on the table. Without warning, he seized the shears. He moved behind her, his hand twisting into her hair. She felt the cold steel touch her scalp. Anna gasped. Her hands shot up, but he shoved her head forward. The first cut was rough, hair pulling, tearing, falling onto her shoulders and lap. Her breath turned into shallow, panicked sobs. Martha sobbed too now, her body shaking as she pressed her face into her apron. She didn't dare move. The shears bit again and again until Anna felt air on her bare scalp, cold and raw. Her hair gathered in clumps around her feet, on her lap, on the table. Each strand felt like a part of her soul falling away. When he finished, Elijah stepped back, breathing heavily. He tossed the shears onto the table with a clatter that echoed off the walls. Anna lifted her shaking hand to her head. Her fingers met rough stubble, skin sticky with sweat and tears. Elijah took the belt from the box, but instead of striking her, he simply placed it beside the pile of hair. A silent threat, an unspoken promise of what could come next. Then he bent low, his lips near her ear. His voice was soft, almost tender. "You belong to me," he whispered. "Don't forget again." Anna didn't move. Her breath stuttered in her chest, her fingers clawing the edge of the chair. Elijah straightened, turned, and left the kitchen. His boots thudded down the hall, the door slamming behind him like a final nail in a coffin. For a long time, Anna didn't move. Martha finally stepped forward, her steps hesitant and broken. She reached out a trembling hand, but Anna jerked away. Martha stopped, her shoulders folding inward like broken wings. Anna rose slowly. Hair slid off her dress, whispering across the floor like dry leaves. She staggered to the corner, pressed her forehead against the cold wall, and pressed her hands flat against it as if trying to merge with the wood and vanish. The room held its breath. Outside, the wind dragged dust across the yard, rattling the walls like distant chains. Anna's silent scream filled the space between each heartbeat, a sound too deep to ever reach her lips. The night after Elijah cut her hair, Anna lay curled on her bed, her fingers pressed into the raw skin of her scalp. Every breath felt sharp, as if the air itself wanted to slice her open. When she finally drifted into a shallow, haunted sleep, she saw flashes. The blue fabric, Martha's trembling hands, the blade of the shears glinting in the lamplight. In every dream, Elijah stood nearby, silent and endless, his eyes always waiting. Morning dragged her back like a cold hand around her throat. The first thing she felt was the smooth alien texture of her shaved head against the pillow. She shuddered. Downstairs, the house was quiet again. The kitchen smelled of weak broth. Martha moved with her usual ghostly steps, but her eyes stayed on the floor. She didn't look at Anna once. Elijah sat at the table, sipping coffee, as if nothing had happened. When Anna entered, he didn't even glance up. She slid into her chair, her body small and stiff. After the silent meal, Elijah stood. He pushed his chair back slowly, the legs screeching against the floor. He looked at Anna for a long moment. Then, without a word, he turned and walked toward the barn. Anna felt something shift inside her. A quiet urgency, a whisper too soft to catch fully. When she rose, Martha touched her arm gently, her fingers cold and paper thin. Anna turned, expecting words, a plea, anything. But Martha only shook her head slightly and let go. Anna slipped into the hallway. Her steps moved on their own, carrying her to a door she had seen but never dared open. Elijah's private room. The handle felt heavy and warm under her palm. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she pushed. The door opened with a slow, aching groan. Inside, the air was stale, thick with sweat and old tobacco. The curtains were drawn tight, leaving the room in a heavy dusk. She saw a large wooden desk covered in papers, old letters, and small folded scraps of fabric. Pieces of clothing, ribbons, even a thin braid of hair bound with string. Anna felt her stomach turn. On the wall above the desk hung a row of photographs. She stepped closer. Each frame held a different young woman. Some smiled faintly, others stared blankly. But every face held the same quiet defeat. Anna's breath caught when she saw the last photo on the far end. A girl with pale hair, a blue dress, the same dress as the torn fabric she had found. Her eyes were wide and full of something that looked like a warning frozen in time. Below each photo, small notes were pinned. Names, dates, short lines. Obedient, resisted, punished, gone. Anna staggered back, her hand over her mouth. Her fingers brushed her own stubble and she felt bile rise in her throat. She turned and saw a trunk half hidden in the corner. She knelt and opened it. Inside, bundles of fabric, personal trinkets, small shoes, trophies. Each object carried a silent scream, heavy as lead. A sudden creak in the hallway snapped her head up. Footsteps, slow and heavy. Anna's body moved before her mind caught up. She closed the trunk, darted to the desk, and slipped behind the door just as it opened. Elijah stepped inside. He paused, sniffing the air like an animal. His eyes scanned the room slowly, moving over the desk, the walls, the trunk. Anna pressed her back against the wall, her heart slamming so violently she thought he might hear it. Sweat ran down her neck, soaking the collar of her dress. Elijah stood by the trunk for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small object, a thin chain with a locket. He held it up to the light, studying it like a jeweler examining a flawed stone. Finally, he turned and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. Anna stayed frozen, counting each second in her head until the world felt real again. Then she slipped out, her feet silent on the floorboards. She rushed to her room and shut the door, her back pressed hard against it. She slid down to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. The images burned into her mind. The photographs, the labels, the trunk. Now she understood. She wasn't just a prisoner. She was one in a line, a collection. Broken pieces to be sorted, labeled, and stored. Anna pressed her forehead to her knees, her breath a sharp, wet tremor. "I am not just another one," she whispered. But in the dark of the room, even her own voice sounded like a lie. That night, the house felt even tighter, like a fist closing around Anna's throat. Every creak of the walls echoed too loud. Every sigh of wind outside carried a threat. She lay awake, her eyes wide, staring at the crooked cross above her bed. Her fingers traced the stubble on her head, each patch a reminder of Elijah's control. Her mind replayed the photos again and again, each face, each small note beneath. The word "gone" stuck to her ribs like a shard of glass. Somewhere deep in the night, she heard footsteps. Slow, careful, almost hesitant. Anna slid off the bed, pressing her ear to the door. A soft knock came, so light she thought she imagined it. She opened the door a crack. Martha stood in the hallway, her thin frame trembling, her hands clenched into her apron. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the lantern she held. Without a word, Martha stepped inside and closed the door behind her. She set the lantern on the floor, the weak flame throwing long broken shadows up the walls. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Anna waited, her pulse a frantic drum. Finally, Martha spoke, her voice so small it almost didn't exist. "He kept them all," Martha whispered, her lips barely moving. "The others, they thought they could leave." Anna swallowed, her throat dry as bone. She stepped closer. "How many?" she asked, her voice raw. Martha's eyes darted to the door as if expecting Elijah to burst in. "Too many," she breathed. "I don't even know all their names, only pieces." Anna felt the room tilt. She gripped the edge of her bed to stay upright. What happened to them? Martha's face crumpled. She covered her mouth with both hands, a small sob slipping between her fingers. After a moment, she forced herself to speak. "Some. They vanished in the night. Some he punished until they couldn't move anymore. Then he buried them." Anna felt her stomach turn. Her mind flashed to the grave she had seen behind the barn. Half hidden under weeds and dry soil, she remembered the torn fabric in her pocket, now hidden under her pillow. Martha leaned closer, her breath sharp and desperate. "I tried to help one girl once," she whispered. "She almost made it to the gate. He caught her. He made me watch." Anna's eyes filled with hot tears. She wanted to reach for Martha, but her arms felt too heavy, as if made of stone. Martha wiped her face roughly. "I can't do it again," she said. "I can't watch another one." A long silence stretched between them. Outside, the wind rattled the nailed window, a dry and lonely sound. Finally, Anna spoke, her voice like a blade dragged across stone. "Will you help me?" Martha's head snapped up. Her eyes filled with terror, then something else, a small shaking spark. Hope or fear, Anna couldn't tell. Before Martha could answer, a floorboard creaked in the hallway. Both women froze, listening. Another step, heavy, deliberate. Martha grabbed the lantern, her hands so tight her knuckles turned white. Without another word, she slipped out of the room, closing the door softly behind her. Anna stood in the dark, her chest heaving. She pressed her back against the wall, her palms clammy and shaking. In the hallway, she heard the slow, heavy steps pass her door, then fade down the stairs. She sank to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest. Her mind raced with the half-whispered stories, the unknown graves, the hidden past. She realized then, she was not just fighting for her own escape. She carried all the voices before her. The ones who carved words in the barn, the ones who left scraps of dresses, the ones labeled gone. Anna buried her face in her arms. Her tears came hard, fast, but silent. In that small, suffocating room, she felt every ghost press against her skin, urging her forward, begging her not to fail. Anna did not sleep after Martha slipped away. She sat in the corner of the room, her back pressed to the wall, her fingers tangled in the rough blanket draped across her shoulders. Every sound from the hallway stabbed into her chest. The wind rattling the boards, the echo of Elijah's boots downstairs. As dawn painted pale stripes across the ceiling, Anna heard quiet footsteps again. She stood quickly, heart hammering so violently It felt like it might tear free. A soft knock. Anna rushed to the door and opened it just enough to see Martha's face. Her eyes were red, lips dry and cracked, but there was something alive in them now. Something fragile and burning. Martha slipped inside, closing the door without a sound. She clutched something in her hand, a small, thin knife with a worn handle. Anna stared at it. Her breath caught halfway to her lungs. Martha pushed it into her palm. "Hide it," she whispered, voice barely more than a breath. "Use it only when you're sure. Only then." Anna's fingers closed around the knife. The metal felt cold and heavy, almost unreal. Her eyes darted up to Martha's face, searching for doubt, for fear. Instead, she saw resolve. Martha grabbed her wrist suddenly, squeezing so hard it hurt. "Listen to me," she hissed. "He knows everything. Every step, every thought. You can't hesitate. You must become smaller than the dust on the floor, quieter than a dying candle." Anna nodded, her lips trembling. "Why are you helping me?" she whispered. Martha's eyes shone with something between grief and fury. "Because I didn't help them," she said, voice cracking. "I watched too long, too many buried, too many pieces left behind." A sob slipped from Anna's mouth, but Martha pressed a shaking finger to her lips. "No sound," she urged. "Not for him. Not for anyone." Martha glanced toward the window, then back at Anna. "He goes into town tomorrow. He'll take Samuel with him. You'll have a few hours? Maybe less." Anna's heart skipped. Hope flickered inside her, sharp and painful. "You must be ready," Martha continued. "Food, water. Cover your tracks. Don't go through the main gate. He watches that even when he's gone. The trail behind the barn leads to the dry ravine. If you reach that, he can't follow on horseback." Anna squeezed the knife so tightly, her knuckles turned white. "Will you come with me?" she asked, her voice breaking. Martha looked away. For a moment, Anna saw the girl Martha had once been, hidden beneath layers of fear and regret. Then she shook her head slowly. "I'm already gone," she said. "But you're not gone yet." Anna's tears slid down her cheeks, hot and silent. Martha stepped closer, resting her forehead against Anna's for one trembling heartbeat. Then she pulled away, turned and slipped out of the room. Anna stood alone in the dark, the knife cold and sharp in her hand. Her body trembled, but her mind felt clearer than it had since she arrived. The sun slowly climbed over the hills outside, lighting up the nailed window in a thin, angry glow. Anna sat on her bed, staring at her palm, feeling the metal bite into her skin. For the first time, the word escape felt real, not just a dream that died with each sunrise. She looked around the small room, seeing it now not as a cell, but as a last checkpoint before a final run. She wiped her tears roughly, pressed the knife under her mattress, and began to plan. Downstairs, she heard Elijah's voice calling for Martha, then Samuel's heavy steps across the yard. Anna closed her eyes and took one long, steady breath. Tomorrow. That night, Anna lay awake, her body pressed flat against the mattress, every muscle tense and listening. The knife hid beneath her, a cold, comforting weight. The moon climbed slowly, spilling pale light across the nailed window. In that glow, she rehearsed every step in her mind. Slip from the room, pass Martha's door, down the stairs, into the kitchen, to the back door, then out to the barn. The path repeated like a silent prayer. Before dawn, she rose. Her movements were small, controlled. She imagined herself as a thin shadow sliding through the cracks of the house. She pulled a threadbare sack from under the bed. Inside, she placed a small piece of bread, a water jar she'd hidden 2 nights before, and an old shawl she'd found behind a crate in the barn. She paused, then pressed the scrap of blue fabric from the other girl deep into the sack, a hidden promise she could not leave behind. Her hands shook as she tied the sack shut. Every knot felt final, like sewing her own skin together, before a long walk into darkness. She checked the knife again. The blade was dull at the tip, but sharp enough to pierce if she pushed hard enough. She closed her fingers around the handle, testing its weight, feeling the quiet violence of it pulse in her palm. When she was done, she stood by the door and listened. Below, she heard Elijah's heavy steps and Martha's softer, broken ones. Samuel's boots moved across the yard, pausing every so often, as if he listened for her too. Anna slipped out into the hallway. Martha's door was ajar, the room inside dark. Anna peeked in and saw Martha sitting on the edge of her bed, hands folded in her lap, staring at the floor. Their eyes met for a heartbeat. Martha gave one small, almost invisible nod. Anna kept moving. She reached the stairs, each step a sharp, burning test of her courage. She saw Elijah's hat on the peg by the front door. Her breath caught in her throat. But the house was otherwise quiet. In the kitchen, she moved quickly. She grabbed a stale heel of bread from the counter and pressed it into the sack. Her hands moved without sound, her heart pounding loud enough to drown out every thought. Then she heard it, Elijah's voice, calling for Samuel outside. It came through the walls like a distant drum, each syllable thick and final. She crept to the back door. Her fingers found the hidden latch Martha had shown her. The rust bit into her skin as she turned it slowly, carefully. The door shuddered, then eased open, revealing the darkness of the yard beyond. The barn loomed ahead, a black shape against the faint light of dawn. She ran to it, feet silent on the dust. Inside, the air smelled of hay and sweat. She found a coil of rope and tied it to her sack. She scanned the corners, the saddle, the broken rake, the pitchfork. She took the pitchfork and tested its weight. Heavy, but it might slow him down if it came to that. Then she moved to the back wall of the barn. There, behind old crates, was a loose plank Martha had whispered about. Anna pulled it aside and saw a narrow gap leading to the dry trail beyond the boundary. The moonlight painted a thin line all the way to the hills. She knelt, breathing hard, and listened. The yard was silent now. The wind rattled the tin roof, a slow, dragging sound like distant footsteps. Anna pressed her forehead to the cool dirt. She thought of all the girls before her, their photos, their scraps of cloth, the carved words in the barn wall. Then she pushed the sack through the gap and crawled halfway after it, feeling the cold night air touch her face like a promise. Her heart trembled, her teeth gritted so hard her jaw ached. She whispered to herself, words like a thin, shaking thread. "You are still here. You are not gone yet." Anna drew one final breath, glanced back at the dark barn behind her, and readied herself for the final run. Anna pushed her sack through the gap and followed, her shoulders scraping against the rough boards. Each inch forward felt like pulling her body out of a grave. When she finally crawled out into the open air, she felt the cold dawn wrap around her like a sharp blade. The dry trail behind the barn stretched ahead, thin and pale under the waking sky. She staggered to her feet, clutching the sack to her chest. Her breath steamed in the air, each exhale jagged and fast. Then a noise, boots crunching against the yard, heavy, steady. Anna turned, her heart a wild drum against her ribs. Elijah stood in the barn doorway, his hat gone, his hair wild, eyes black and wide as empty wells. They stared at each other across the dust. Anna's fingers tightened on the pitchfork handle. Her mouth went dry, words curling into ash before they could rise. Elijah stepped forward, slow and measured. He didn't run. He didn't shout. His silence was worse than any scream. Anna took one step back. The pitchfork shook in her hands. He kept coming. His face was calm, almost soft, as if he were approaching a lost calf. His voice when it came was low and even. "Put it down," he said. "Come inside." Anna's grip tightened so hard her fingers ached. Her feet shuffled again, pushing her closer to the trail. Elijah's eyes flickered to the trail, then back to her. His mouth twitched, the smallest hint of a smirk. "You think you can leave?" he asked. Anna's throat clenched. She thought of Martha's face, of the girls in the photos, of the small scrap of blue fabric in her sack. She shook her head slowly, her breath coming out in sharp bursts. Elijah lunged. Anna screamed. A raw animal sound that split the morning air. She swung the pitchfork up. Elijah's hand closed around the wooden handle just in time. They struggled, bodies twisting in the dust, feet scraping against the dry ground. His strength pressed into her, heavy and final. Anna felt her knees buckle, her arms burning. Then she remembered the knife. With a desperate cry, she let go of the pitchfork with one hand and reached into her dress. Her fingers closed around the knife's handle. She pulled it free and thrust upward, all her weight behind it. A sharp gasp burst from Elijah. He stumbled back, his hand pressed to his side. Blood soaked through his shirt, dark and spreading fast. For a moment, they both just stood there staring at each other. Anna's chest heaved, her hand still gripping the knife, her knuckles white. Elijah's mouth opened, but no words came. He dropped to one knee, his face twisted in shock and rage. Anna took a step back, then another. Her legs felt weak, but they obeyed. Elijah reached out, his fingers clawing the dirt, pulling himself forward an inch at a time. His eyes never left hers, two black hooks buried deep in her chest. Anna turned and ran. Her feet pounded the dry trail, dust exploding around her ankles. The hills loomed ahead, the dry ravine waiting like a silent mouth. Behind her, she heard Elijah's ragged breath, the scrape of his body dragging through the dust. Anna didn't look back. Each step felt like tearing through chains, each breath a small victory pulled from the jaws of death. When she reached the edge of the ravine, she fell to her knees and, gasping, she turned her head just enough to see Elijah on his hands and knees, crawling, a dark stain spreading across his belly. Their eyes met one last time. Then Anna pushed herself up and slipped down into the dry ravine, vanishing from his sight. Anna stumbled down the dry ravine, her breath tearing at her throat. Dust clung to her skin, turning her sweat into muddy streaks. The sack bounced against her side, the knife still slick in her trembling hand. Above, the sky turned a pale, colorless gray. The sun crawled slowly up the horizon, cold and indifferent. Behind her, the ranch was silent, but she could still feel Elijah's eyes, heavy as iron hooks in her back. Even wounded, his presence pressed against her mind like a boot on her neck. She kept moving. Her feet slipped on loose rocks, her knees buckled again and again. Each time she fell, she forced herself up, pushing forward. The ravine twisted sharply, leading her deeper into the dry hills. Anna clung to the walls for balance. She thought she heard a voice once, a ragged groan echoing in the wind. She didn't look back. Her mind flashed with images. The photos in Elijah's room, the pale braid tied with a ribbon, the girl's hollow stares. Martha's face, whispering, "Only when you're sure." She pressed on. At the end of the ravine, a narrow trail opened into a dry field scattered with brittle shrubs. Anna paused, leaning against a rock. Her chest burned, her vision swam with black dots. She dropped to her knees, clutching the knife against her heart. Dust rose around her like smoke. For a moment, she listened. No boots, no low voice calling her back. Only the wind, thin and sharp, tugging at the loose edges of her dress. Anna tilted her head up. The sky seemed impossibly wide, a pale ceiling stretching forever. She closed her eyes and felt the sun touch her shaved scalp. A shiver ran through her, a violent electric tremor that felt almost like life. She pressed the knife into the dirt and began to untie the sack. Her fingers moved clumsily, weak from fear and blood loss. Inside, she found the scrap of blue fabric. Anna lifted it to her lips, pressing it there like a prayer. She didn't know the girl's name, but she felt her pulse in that thread. Every silent scream, every whispered, "Oh, help me," scratched into wood. Tears blurred her vision. She let them come, hot and unstoppable. She was not ready to stand yet. Her body folded in on itself, small and trembling. Anna curled forward, forehead against the ground, and let her grief spill into the dust. Each sob felt sharp, tearing a new wound inside her chest. Minutes, maybe hours, passed. The sun rose higher, baking the ground beneath her. Finally, she pushed herself upright, swaying slightly. Her knees were raw and bleeding, her throat dry as cracked earth. She looked back once, over the ridge. The ranch was gone from sight, hidden behind hills and rock. The place that had swallowed so many before her now felt like a distant nightmare clawing at her heels. Anna turned away. She tied the sack back up, slipped the knife inside, and pulled the shawl over her shoulders. Step by step, she moved forward across the dry field. The wind tangled around her, pushing at her back, as if urging her to keep moving. Her eyes fixed on the horizon, a line so thin it looked like a thread she might catch and pull herself into a new life. Her breath shook with each step. Her body carried all the ghosts with her, each one a small silent flame in her ribs. Anna did not know if she was free yet, but she was moving. And for now, that was enough. Anna walked until the sun sat high above her, a white eye watching without mercy. Her steps grew smaller, her feet dragging deep lines through the dust. She found no trees, no water, only endless dry earth stretching beyond sight. Each breath tasted of heat and salt. Her knees trembled, but she refused to stop. Finally, at the crest of a small rise, she collapsed. The sack slipped from her fingers, rolling into the dirt. Anna fell forward, her forehead pressing into the hot ground. She lay still, her chest heaving. Every heartbeat felt like a hammer blow against the inside of her ribs. She thought of Martha's face, of Samuel's silent warning glances, of the carved words in the barn wall. She thought of each photograph on Elijah's wall, each girl labeled and stored like a tool left to rust. Anna turned her head slowly, staring at the scrap of blue fabric lying beside her. She reached out, dragging it closer, clutching it to her cheek. Above, a single crow circled, its cry slicing the sky open. Anna listened, her mind drifting in and out of the present. She pressed her palms into the dirt, pushing herself upright one last time. Her arms shook violently, and her eyes blurred. She rose to her knees, then slowly to her feet. The horizon quivered in the heat, a wavering promise of something. Freedom or death, she could not tell. Anna took one step forward, then another. Her breath stuttered, her lips cracked open, whispering words too soft for the wind to carry. I am still here. The words felt different now. Not a plea, not a question, but a fragile, stubborn claim. A thread that held her together when everything else had been stripped away. She turned once, glancing back. The hills behind her looked small and distant, as if they belonged to another lifetime. The ranch was gone, swallowed by dust and memory. Anna turned away for the last time. She pulled the shawl around her shoulders, tied the sack to her side, and moved forward. Her body wavered with each step, but she did not stop. Every footfall pressed deeper into the earth, carving a silent path that no one else had finished before her. She carried the weight of the lost girls in her ribs, each step an echo of their stories, but she also carried something else, a thin, flickering light, a final defiance that even Elijah's hands couldn't crush. Ahead, the land stretched on forever. Anna did not know where it would end. She only knew she would walk until she found out. And in that first true breath beyond the ranch, for a moment so brief it almost vanished, she felt something like freedom move through her blood.